Have you ever stopped calling your own child, just stopped, one day, without a word? My name is Lorraine, and I did exactly that. Not out of spite. Not even out of anger. But because of one sentence that shattered something deep inside me. They say mothers always hold on. But what happens when you finally let go? Before we dive in, let me know, what time are you listening to this, and where are you? Drop a comment below, I'd love to hear from you. It was a Thursday afternoon in late October, the kind of quiet fall day where the wind doesn't quite bite, but it nudges the bones enough to make you reach for a sweater. I remember the sun poured through the kitchen window in long, slanted strips, warming the tiles but not me. That was the day everything shifted, though you wouldn't have guessed it from the outside. No thunderclap. No slammed doors. Just silence, and something small inside me finally gave way. I'd brewed a cup of chamomile like I always did around 4. The cat, Ruthie, was curled on the windowsill, twitching in her sleep. The kettle hissed. The world turned as usual. Then the phone rang. Mara. My daughter never called for long. Our conversations had shrunk over the years, from entire evenings curled on the couch, to 5-minute check-ins, to rushed, obligatory, just letting you know I'm alive updates. Still, I answered. Of course I answered. Hey, honey, I said, already smiling, already bracing. Hey. Her voice was clipped, distracted. I asked if she'd thought about coming home for Thanksgiving. I said I'd make the pumpkin pie she used to love, the one with the ginger snap crust. I told her the guest room was clean and ready, even though it always was. There was a pause. Then she said it. Maybe I don't want to sit with someone who's just old and bitter. I didn't speak. I couldn't. I heard the hum of the refrigerator behind me. Ruthie stirred. My tea went cold in my hand. I said, I see. And I hung up. It wasn't dramatic. I didn't cry. I didn't throw the mug or drop to my knees. I sat down at the table and stared out the window at the bare trees, the brittle gold leaves clinging to their branches like they didn't know the season had already moved on. I sat there for 2 hours. The tea steeped into a darker stain in the cup. The light shifted across the counter. Ruthie stretched and left the room. All I kept thinking was, it didn't even hurt. It should have. The words, old and bitter, should have landed like a punch. But they didn't. They didn't pierce. They numbed. Because what do you do when you realize your child doesn't just misunderstand you, she resents you? What do you do when the thing you built your entire identity around, this idea of being a good mother, crumbles in 5 syllables? And the worst part? I wasn't even surprised. That was the truth I'd never said out loud, not even to myself. This wasn't the first time Mara said something cold. Not the first time she made me feel like a burden. It was just the first time I stopped pretending she didn't mean it. I reached for the little leather notebook I keep in the drawer, the one with a broken spine and folded corners. I flipped past the old grocery lists and quotes I used to scribble down from books I never finished. On a fresh page, I wrote one word. Enough. I put the notebook away. I opened the drawer beside it and slipped my phone in, screen down. Closed it with care, like putting something to rest. I didn't call her back. I didn't text. I didn't check to see if she posted anything on Facebook, or if she messaged. I didn't pace or replay the call in my head. I didn't imagine how to fix it. I just stopped. Stopped trying to be the version of myself that Mara might find palatable. Stopped trying to prove I was still worthy of a daughter's love. Stopped chasing something that only ran further the more I reached. You see, I thought the pain would come later. I thought I'd feel it around midnight, or the next morning, when the silence settled in fully. But the strangest thing happened. I felt peaceful. Not happy. Not healed. But clear. I don't think I'd ever felt that before. I didn't know, sitting in that creaky kitchen chair with Ruthie circling my ankles and the sun sliding off the table, that something in me had shifted permanently. I didn't realize yet what was beginning to break loose, like thawing ice in spring. I only knew this: I was done asking to be loved. That day wasn't the loudest day of my life. It wasn't the worst. But it was the one that changed me most. And I still remember it like it was yesterday. Because that was the day I stopped calling. The day I started listening to myself. The day I said, quietly and finally, no more. The first few days after I stopped calling Mara were quiet. Not silent in a dramatic way, just quiet in the sort of way that wraps around your ankles like fog. The kind of quiet you notice more in the spaces where noise used to live. I thought I'd feel hollow. I thought I'd ache for her voice, her updates, even her clipped tone. But what surprised me most wasn't the absence, it was the calm. The deep, almost guilty relief of not bracing for disappointment. I spent more time in the backyard, pruning the dying lavender bushes, letting Ruthie chase dry leaves across the lawn. I fixed the loose cabinet door under the sink. I read a mystery novel from the library and forgot to finish it. My life wasn't better, not exactly. But it was lighter. Of course, the memories didn't leave. They came in like foghorns, low and sudden. One afternoon, I found an old photo tucked into the back of the junk drawer, Mara at her college graduation, cap crooked, smiling with her friends. I was behind the camera. No one had asked me to join the photo. That day, I sat alone in the back row while she hugged her father in front of everyone. He'd shown up late, still smelling like cologne and gin, but he brought flowers. I brought 4 years of helping her study, of working extra shifts, of keeping everything afloat after he left. And still, he got the smile. That day stuck to me like sap. Sweet at first. Then it hardened. Then it held. Back then, I told myself that this was what mothers did. We loved quietly. We sacrificed so our children wouldn't have to. We swallowed our feelings because their needs came first. I thought I was strong for it. Now, I wasn't so sure. A week after that phone call, the last one, I found myself walking into Maple Fern, a small grocery store 2 blocks from my house. I went in for dish soap and bananas. I left with something else. She was standing by the frozen aisle, holding a bag of peas and tapping her foot like the floor owed her answers. Tall, curly red-gray hair piled in a twist. She turned and smiled right at me like we were old friends. "You look like someone who could use a good salsa," she said. I blinked. "Excuse me?" "Not the food. The dance. There's a class Tuesday night. Over at the community center." She pointed with the bag of peas. "You should come. You have the posture of someone who used to love music." I laughed. Actually laughed. "You get all that from my spine?" "I get it from your eyes," she said. "You look like you forgot how to have fun." Her name was Nina Torres. She was 2 years younger than me, wore a turquoise scarf like it was armor, and talked with the kind of ease I'd never had. She had 1 daughter in Alaska who hadn't called in 6 months. "She thinks I ruined her marriage," Nina told me casually as we stood at the checkout. Funny how kids only remember the parts of us they didn't like. I didn't know why I wrote down the class schedule. I didn't know why I changed out of my flannel pajamas that Tuesday night. But at 6:45, I showed up at the center in sneakers and a shirt I hadn't worn since 2009. And there, in that musty gymnasium with the scuffed floor and bad lighting, something cracked open. The instructor paired us off. I danced with a retired pharmacist named Glenn who had 2 left feet and endless patience. I tripped. I apologized. I laughed. And it wasn't the small, polite chuckle I'd practiced at book clubs or family dinners. It was a laugh from deep in my belly, the kind I hadn't heard from myself in years. After class, Nina and I sat on the curb, sweaty and breathless. "My daughter says I'm emotionally manipulative," she said, popping open a Diet Coke. "But what I think she means is, I stopped letting her walk all over me." I was quiet for a moment, watching the streetlight flicker. "She says I'm bitter," I finally said. "That I'm hard to be around." Nina looked at me, really looked. "Are you?" "I didn't think so," I said. "But maybe I've been sad so long it started to look like bitterness." "Sadness doesn't make you bitter," she said. "Being ignored does. Being invisible. That's what does it." The drive home was silent. No radio. Just the thrum of tires and my heart beating in time with a rhythm I didn't recognize yet. Something was shifting. I wasn't sure where it was going, but I knew I didn't want to go back. 3 weeks after the last phone call, the one that split something inside me, Mara showed up at my door. It was early evening. I was folding laundry while the cat snored on the windowsill, half listening to a jazz station on the radio. The doorbell startled me. No one ever rang the bell anymore. I dried my hands on my sweater and opened the door. There she was. Hair pulled into a bun that hadn't seen a brush in days. Hoodie zipped to her neck, mascara smudged under both eyes. A single duffel bag over one shoulder and a paper grocery sack in her arms. She didn't say hi. She said, "I need somewhere to stay. Just for a few days." I left him. I stepped back and let her in. No questions, no dramatics. She dropped her bag with a thud in the hallway, didn't even take off her shoes. Walked straight to the kitchen, opened the fridge, grabbed a soda, and cracked it open like she owned the place. I watched her from the doorway. Same house, same fridge I'd stocked, same daughter, but something in me had changed. I wasn't scared of her moods anymore. "You can take the guest room," I said. "Sheets are clean." She nodded, didn't say thank you. That was Mara's way, always had been. Over the next few days, her presence filled the house like smoke. Not joking exactly, but always there. She left the TV on, used my bath towels, scattered shoes in the hallway. She opened my mail once, thinking it was hers. I didn't yell. I didn't even flinch. But I noticed it all. She never asked how I'd been. She never mentioned the phone call. It was as if she'd erased that part, moved straight past it like skipping a song on a playlist. On the 4th night, I made a casserole. Nothing fancy. Just tuna, noodles, breadcrumbs, the kind she used to like when she was 10. We ate in silence for a while. Then she said it. "I see you're different," she said, spearing a chunk of broccoli. "You seem okay. Happier. I guess it's easier when you don't have to worry about anyone but yourself." I didn't look up. She went on. "But I guess you never really got how hard it was to grow up with someone like you." I set my fork down. Slowly. Carefully. "You think I was hard to grow up with?" She shrugged. "You were always on edge. Always tired. It was like being around someone who needed everything to be just so. I always felt like I was in your way." It landed like a punch wrapped in silk. Almost soft, almost. But the words sliced. And not because they weren't true. Because they were the version of truth she had carried for years, and I'd helped write that story by never telling my own. I wanted to tell her about the nights I sat in the hallway after she'd gone to bed, just breathing through panic attacks. About the time I returned birthday gifts so I could pay for her dance shoes. About the way I'd convinced myself that being a good mother meant disappearing, until I'd almost fully vanished. But I didn't say any of that. Instead, I cleared my plate, rinsed it in the sink, and said, "I'm going to bed early." You know where everything is. That night, I opened my old notebook again. The one where I'd once written enough. This time, I wrote something new. I will not apologize for living my own life. It wasn't poetry. It wasn't some grand revelation. But it was mine. The next morning, I locked my bedroom door. Not to keep her out. To remind myself that I was allowed to have a boundary. I picked up tulips from the farmer's stand down the street and arranged them in a chipped vase in the middle of the kitchen table. Bright yellow and unapologetically cheerful. Then I turned on music, real loud. Nina Simone, singing her heart out. Mara didn't say a word. She just stared at me when I passed by with a load of laundry. But I could feel it, something had shifted. This was still my house. It was one of those soft autumn Saturdays where the sky looks like it's thinking. Not gray, not quite blue. Just undecided. Nina and I had just finished our dance class, salsa that morning, full of clumsy turns and even clumsier flirting from Glenn, and we ended up at that little cafe across from the library, the one with the crooked porch and chipped mugs. We sat outside under a rusted heat lamp, steam rising from our coffee like it had something to say. You ever think we raised them too gently? Nina asked, stirring a packet of sugar into her cup with more force than necessary. I don't know, I said. I tried to give Mara what I didn't have. Space. Freedom. Safety. And what did you get back? She asked, eyes locking with mine. A whole lot of guilt wrapped in silence? I didn't answer right away. The question hit too close to home. Nina leaned back and said it casually, like she was commenting on the weather. I kicked my daughter out once. She was 23. Accused me of ruining her life with my neediness. Said I made her marriage harder because I always hovered. So I told her to go live her own life if I was such a burden. I looked up. You actually said that? I did. And guess what? She smiled, bitter and proud at once. 3 years later, she sent me a postcard from Maine. Said thank you. I raised my eyebrows. She wrote, thank you for finally loving yourself more than you loved being needed. That one hit me low in the stomach. I stared into my coffee and asked the thing I hadn't dared voice aloud. Do you ever feel like you were the villain? Nina tilted her head. Yeah. But only when I still believed my job was to be the hero. She took a sip, then added, we're not their punching bags, Lorraine. We're their mothers. And being a mother doesn't mean catching every shard they throw just because they're hurting. I didn't say anything for a long time. We watched the leaves drift down from a nearby tree. A red one landed on Nina's boot. She didn't brush it away. When I got home, the house felt heavier. Not loud, just tense, like it was holding its breath. Ruthie wasn't in the window. That was my first clue. Then I saw my bedroom door half open. And Mara inside. She was crouched by my nightstand, digging through the drawer I hadn't opened in months. The one where I kept old prescription bottles, backup keys, and letters I never mailed. She froze when I walked in. Her voice cracked. She held up a bottle of pills, the label faded. I thought maybe you didn't need these anymore. I didn't answer. I used to wonder, she said quietly. If you ever thought about not being here. I exhaled slowly. I thought about a lot of things. She turned the bottle over in her hand like it held answers she never bothered asking before. I figured, you'd moved on from all that. That you forgot. I walked over and gently took the bottle from her fingers. Then I placed it back in the drawer. I didn't forget, I said. I just stopped living in that version of myself. Mara stood. Her eyes were glassy but dry. I'm sorry for going through your stuff. I nodded. But I didn't let her off the hook. This room is mine, I said. And I need you to respect that. She nodded, too. A slow, almost childlike motion. Then she left the room without another word. I didn't slam the door. I didn't lock it. But I did close it. Gently. Later that night, after the dishes were done and Mara had retreated to the guest room, I stood in the hallway bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. I looked older than I remembered. But I also looked solid. Like someone who had been worn down and reshaped, not broken. The skin around my eyes had softened, but there was something sharper beneath. A steadiness. Maybe even peace. And in that moment, I knew. If the cost of keeping my daughter close was losing myself again, I wouldn't pay it. Not this time. Not anymore. It's a strange thing, feeling like a guest in your own home. I used to think that kind of feeling was reserved for bad marriages or rented apartments, but no, your child can make you feel it too. The tension had settled in like humidity. You couldn't always see it, but you felt it in your skin, behind your eyes. Every clatter of dishes, every footstep in the hallway, every sigh from Mara's mouth, it all rubbed raw. She moved through the house like it belonged to her. She turned the thermostat up without asking. Left the bathroom light on all night. Used my good hand towels to wipe off her makeup. Not out of malice, just assumption. As if the rules didn't apply to her. As if I was back on duty, back to cooking and folding and listening and apologizing. But I wasn't. Not anymore. I had changed, even if she couldn't see it. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning. The air outside was crisp. I'd made myself a cup of coffee and was reading on the porch, trying to start the day on my own terms. Then she came stomping outside, waving her phone in one hand. "You changed the lock on your bedroom?" she snapped. "I did," I said calmly. "Why?" I looked her in the eye. "Because I wanted to." Her eyebrows shot up like I'd slapped her. "Seriously? Are you okay, Mom? This isn't normal. You don't trust me now." I set my book down slowly. "This is my house, Mara. I'm allowed to have privacy." She crossed her arms. "This whole new you thing is getting weird. It's like you're trying to prove some point." I nodded once. "Maybe I am." There was a silence. Then she said it. The thing that gutted the room. "You know Dad left because of you, right? You were exhausting. Controlling. You think I had a childhood with all your moods and rules." I froze. Not because it hurt, but because it used to. Those were the lies I'd whispered to myself for years when I couldn't sleep. That I was too much. That I drove everyone away. That love left because I wasn't soft enough, good enough, selfless enough. But this time, I didn't cry. I laughed. Just a small sound. Quiet. But sharp, like a needle popping a balloon. "You're right," I said, still half smiling. I used to believe every word of that. I thought if I were different, less tired, less scared, your father would have stayed, and you'd have been happier. I leaned forward. But the truth is, I was holding everything together while he drank himself sick and disappeared for weekends. I made excuses for both of you for years. She looked stunned. "You were a child, and I tried to protect you," I continued. "But now you're an adult. And I won't stand here and let you rewrite history to keep yourself comfortable." Her face changed. A flicker of something, confusion, maybe even fear, passed through her eyes. I stood up, went inside, and came back with my old suitcase. It was a dull blue thing, scuffed at the corners, handle sticking. I set it down in the center of the living room. She stared at it. "I'm not kicking you out," I said. "But I'm drawing a line." She didn't say anything. If you want to stay here, I went on, you stay as someone who sees me. Who respects me. Not as someone who blames me for every piece of pain she hasn't sorted through. I crossed my arms. This house is no longer a place to hide from your own life, Mara. If you want to heal here, fine. But you won't bleed on me while you do it. She opened her mouth. Closed it. I waited. She finally asked, what if I can't change overnight? I exhaled slowly. Then don't. But be honest about where you are. Don't pretend I'm the problem while you avoid your own reflection. There was a beat of silence. Then she picked up the suitcase, set it by the door, but didn't walk out. She sat down. Not next to me. Just down. We stayed like that for a long while, the sun slanting through the windows, dust catching the light. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel cruel. I felt something closer to steady. For once, I wasn't afraid of what would happen next. Because no matter what came, I knew I wouldn't disappear again. For 2 whole days, the house lived in a kind of breathless hush. Mara barely spoke. I didn't push. She stayed in the guest room most of the time, scrolling on her phone or typing furiously into her laptop like she was trying to build a new life with nothing but a screen. I kept to my own rhythm. Raked leaves in the backyard. Watered the potted herbs on the windowsill. I even went to the Wednesday night salsa class, where Nina taught me a move that made my hip crack so loud we both laughed for 5 minutes straight. I laughed until I wheezed. That laugh, just mine, just for me, felt like a reclaiming. On Friday evening, I sat down for dinner. Just soup and toast, nothing fancy. Ruthie was curled at my feet, warm and lazy. I'd set 1 plate. I hadn't asked Mara to join me. But she came anyway. She walked into the kitchen holding a piece of paper in her hand. Her face was still, like she'd practiced not showing anything. Without a word, she placed it on the table in front of me. It was a housing form, temporary residency paperwork issued by the state for someone in between leases. I need your signature, she said. If you don't sign, I'll have to leave by next week. I looked up at her, then down at the paper. The form asked if the applicant had permission to reside at the listed address. If the homeowner consented. I'll sign, I said. Her shoulders dropped slightly. Maybe in relief, maybe in defeat. But, I added, you need to understand, living here isn't free. And I don't mean money. She tilted her head. Then what do you mean? I mean respect, I said, meeting her eyes. Acknowledging that I'm a person. That I get to decide what kind of home I live in. That I'm not just a fallback. Something shifted in her jaw. A twitch, a tightening. You always do this, she said. You act like you're being so fair, but you're judging me the whole time. No, Mara, I said calmly. I'm finally telling the truth. That's when it cracked. You've always controlled everything, she snapped. What I wore, who I talked to, when I came home. Don't pretend like you're some victim in all this. You made me feel small my whole life. I set down my spoon, slowly. My heart was beating faster, but I held still. You know what hurts the most, she continued. You act like you're this saint who sacrificed everything, but you were just doing what made you feel important. Her words hit hard, but not because they were accurate. Because I used to believe them myself. Mara, I said softly, I did make mistakes. I see that now. I tried to protect you from everything, including your own feelings. I took on too much, and I thought that made me strong. But it made me tired. And quiet. And resentful. I paused, letting it hang between us. I was wrong to think you needed me to do everything. But you're wrong, too, if you think I did it without pain. She didn't say anything. I'm not perfect, I added. But I'm not your punching bag either. And I won't let you treat me like one just because you're hurting. Her lip quivered. For a second, I thought she might cry. But she didn't. She turned, walked out of the room, and shut the door to the guest room behind her. I sat alone at the table, hand wrapped around my mug. The tea inside had gone lukewarm. I didn't chase her. I didn't rehearse what I should have said. I just sat there, listening to the low hum of the fridge and the wind tapping at the window. There were no tears in my eyes. And that, in itself, felt like a small kind of victory. A week went by. Mara was still in the house, but the air had shifted. There were no more raised voices. No slamming of doors or heavy sighs. She moved like a shadow now, quiet, distant, present but unreachable. We didn't talk, not really. Not beyond passing comments like "the mail's on the counter" or "we're out of milk." She stayed mostly in the guest room, and I let her. I wasn't waiting anymore. I wasn't measuring my worth in her approval. But the silence wasn't peace. It was just the pause before something ended. One morning, I stood in the kitchen after my walk, the early light pooling on the floor like spilled butter. The house was still. Ruthie rubbed against my leg, asking for breakfast. And I realized I had things left to say. Not to her face. Not now. But still, things that needed air. I pulled out a sheet of lined paper from the drawer, the kind with blue margins and faint yellowing. Sat down at the kitchen table. Took a breath. I wrote slowly, every word heavier than it looked. I didn't start with anger. I didn't list all the ways she'd hurt me. I started here. I love you. That has never changed. But I can't keep disappearing just to be close to you. My hand trembled halfway through. I spent years believing that if I gave more, you'd come closer. But every time I erased a piece of myself to fit your version of me, I got smaller. And now, I'm done being small. It wasn't long. Just a few honest lines. But it felt like I was reclaiming something I hadn't realized I'd lost, my voice. I folded the paper and set it on the kitchen table beside her keys. Then I picked up my purse and walked out the door. There was a dance that evening in the town square. Outdoor lights strung up like stars, folding chairs circling a makeshift floor. I didn't tell anyone I was going. I didn't dress fancy, just a blue cardigan, jeans, the same sneakers I always wore. The music was loud and clumsy, people laughing more than dancing right. I swayed with Nina through a few songs, drank cider from a paper cup, and let the night hold me like I belonged there. For once, I didn't feel like someone's mother. Just a woman with sore knees and her own rhythm. When I got home, the porch light was still on. I opened the door, expecting to find her in the guest room, earbuds in, curtains drawn. But the air was different. Too still. The kitchen light was on. The tea towel I'd left on the stove was folded. Her shoes were gone. And on the table, right next to the letter I'd left, was a small folded note in her handwriting. It wasn't dramatic. Just 8 words, written in blue ink. I'll call you when I know how to talk. I stood there, holding it, my eyes tracing the curves of each letter. I half expected my knees to buckle. Or maybe I thought I'd feel rage. Or grief. But what came instead was quiet. Real quiet. The kind that didn't ache. I walked to the counter, poured myself a glass of red wine, and sat down at the table. I didn't rush to clean her room. I didn't rush to call anyone. I didn't even rush to reread the note. I just sat there, letting the stillness wrap around me like a quilt. The moonlight spilled across the kitchen tiles, soft and silver. Ruthie curled at my feet. I took a sip and let it settle. And I thought, with more peace than sadness. It's been a month since Mara left. Bend has settled into winter. Snow clings to the porch railings like it belongs there. The kind of cold that makes the air feel sharp, but not cruel. I wake earlier these days, even before the sun. Not from anxiety or habit, just because I want to. I used to dread mornings. The quiet felt like abandonment. I'd sit at the table, sipping lukewarm tea, wondering who I'd offended by growing older, by needing too much or too little. But now, there's something about these mornings that feels full. I used to think stillness meant emptiness. Now I know it can mean peace. I've started journaling again. Every morning. Nothing fancy, just a few lines in a cheap spiral notebook. I write whatever's on my mind. Not to record anything. Not for anyone to read. Just to stay in conversation with myself. Some days, the words come like a slow stream. Other days, they arrive like a knock on the door I forgot I'd locked. One morning, I wrote, "I no longer measure my worth by how easy I am to be around." Another morning, "I used to beg for love that cost me too much. Now I plant it, water it, and only share what overflows." I'm not trying to be profound. I'm just trying to be honest. Nina and I still dance once a week. She's invited me to a line dancing night she swears isn't just for retirees. We'll see. One afternoon, I told her, I don't know if Mara and I will ever get back to what we were. But the truth is, I don't want to go back. She nodded, finishing her coffee. Because you're not the same woman anymore. I'm not, I said. And I don't want to be the only one holding the thread between us. It was strangling me. Then, a few days ago, Mara called. I was folding laundry in the living room. The phone rang, and I didn't even hesitate to pick it up. Her voice was quiet. A little unsteady. "Hi, Mom? I don't want to talk long. I'm working part-time now. Staying with a roommate until I can get my own place. I've started therapy." I waited. "And I just wanted you to know," she said, "I'm not blaming you anymore. I see things now. I see myself. And I'm sorry." I didn't cry. I didn't rush to fill the space. I just said, "Thank you for telling me the truth." There was silence. A warm one, this time. No promises. No declarations. Just a moment that felt real. That evening, I got an invitation from my cousin in Salem, Christmas dinner, same as always, potluck style. I didn't go. I didn't even feel guilty about it. Instead, I hosted something small at my house. Just Nina, a couple from the dance class who bring their own folding chairs everywhere, and the Millers from next door, who brought a pie big enough to feed 20. We ate around my kitchen table, elbow to elbow, passing mashed potatoes and stories like we'd known each other forever. Afterward, we moved the coffee table and danced to old records. The kind that crackle between tracks. We laughed. Loud, full-bellied laughter. The kind that makes your cheeks hurt. And I remember standing there, in the middle of it all, thinking, this isn't the family I was born into. But it's the one I chose to keep. That night, after everyone left and the dishes were drying on the rack, I stood by the kitchen window. Snow was falling again, soft and steady. I put my hand to my chest. Not because it hurt. Just to feel myself breathing. And I said, not loudly, not to anyone in particular. I used to think I was just the background in someone else's story. I paused, letting the snow fill the silence. But maybe I was always the one holding the brush. You know, I used to think that healing meant fixing what was broken. But now, at 71, I see it differently. Sometimes healing means letting things be, letting them change, letting them go, even if they once meant everything. If you've made it this far with me, thank you. Maybe you've had your own Mara. Or maybe, like me, you're just learning how to make peace with the silence. Have you ever had to choose yourself, even when it hurt? If this story stayed with you, I hope you'll join me again next time. There's still so much life left to unfold, quiet, imperfect, and deeply ours.